That works. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. My name's Jörg Schnermann. I'm the general manager at Domain Sponsor in Europe, German office. And I have the pleasure today of being your MC. Well, first of all, I didn't know what MC meant, and I learned that it's Master of Ceremonies, where I really feel that today is more of, I feel more like a Master of Celebrations, looking at the agenda and the evening program. I think it's going to be a fantastic day. And, just looking at the rows here, I think you all must have had a very productive day and a very fantastic evening at the Automotive Museum. And, I'm very sure that's going to continue today. Just, looking ahead at the agenda, just in a few minutes, we'll have Lisa and this panel talk about domain valuation techniques and, buying, selling, and helping you with that. I think that's going to be a very, very interesting discussion. Right after at 11, we have, really one of our highlights of this show. It's the keynote fireside chat with Twitter co-founder Biz Stone. I think not much needs to be said about that. I'm very sure that's going to be very entertaining and interesting for everybody. We'll have lunch after that, and right after our final panel discussion, which will be about search engine optimization tips and insights for this year. Finally, for the program, we have the Monica domain auction, of course, at 4:30. Will there be another $1 million sale? Just make sure you're there. Get your pedals before at the Monica booth inside the exhibition hall. And I think it'll be a great finale for the afternoon program. Before, of course, we'll have our, I'd say, one of our highlights, famous farewell party. Domain Sponsor is known for hosting, I think, really great farewell parties. Some call them epic, even. I'm sure it'll be great. It'll be at the House of Blues at Sunset Strip. We'll have the Lucent dossier. So for some of you who might have seen the Cirque du Soleil at the beach down there, I'm told they are the sexier version of that and should be very entertaining. And I want to make sure, Lisa asked me to make sure to mention that there will be a Women in Domaining reception at 6:30 tonight. Everybody's invited. You have to be a woman. And I think it's a great beginning into an exciting evening for all the ladies. So, Lisa, the stage is yours.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for coming. Again, we're going to be talking about domain valuations, buying and selling techniques. I wanted to introduce our panel. We have Paul Nix with GoDaddy. He's responsible for the product roadmap and development for GoDaddy's aftermarket. He establishes the trends pretty much for everything that GoDaddy does in their relationships with selling premium domain names and others through their aftermarket networks. We have Lissi. She's the Chief Sales Officer with Sato. So she is responsible for their global operations for sales, marketing, business development. And she's been with that company. How long have you been there now?
Almost 7 years.
Yes, 7 years. And then we have Ken, CEO of Marksman. He is an expert in intellectual property and trademark protection. He helps Fortune 500 companies establish and protect their brands. He also assists them in their domain acquisitions and sales. So I think what we're going to do is let them each have a little bit of time on stage to talk about some of their experiences with domain valuation techniques. Then we'll have a little bit of a question and answer session, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. Would you like to get started?
You bet.
Excellent.
Where's my clicker up here? Thank you. I like that. Hey. Now, full disclosure here. I agreed to do this before they told me how to do a PowerPoint. So we'll see how polished my PowerPoint skills are at this point. So hi, I'm Paul Nix. Again, I run the aftermarket for GoDaddy. That includes everything from domain valuations, the appraisals algorithm, down to the parking companies, the auctions, the premium listings, all manners of that. Hello? Walk this way. All right, so when we're talking today, we're going to talk about a couple different kinds. Well, there are a couple different kinds of valuations. So a lot of times people will come to me and say, why did I get this sort of appraisal on this domain? Obviously, it's worth this much more. The person I'm trying to sell it to happens to have the exact name as their last name as this domain name, and you said it's only worth $50. Things of that nature. So I want to be very clear that there are different types of valuations for different types of sales techniques. So what we've got is basically bulk versus boutique is how I like to go over it. Bulk would be anything if you're looking to do domaining in volume, buy, flip, high volume, reasonable margins, not the $10 to $500,000 type sales. We're talking the $10 to $300, $10 to $500 in volume. Boutique sales, those would be far more on the buy and hold side of the world. Now, these are emerging trends, things of that nature. So a lot of people went out and bought say, the 3D and 4D names. Those I would consider boutique, but you're not looking to flip those immediately. I'm just going to talk about bulk, and there's a reason for this. GoDaddy is good at selling a lot of things, and we do this through the avail check path. We're able to take the enormous volume of people looking for domain names and turn them around very quickly. The people who work with me are very good at putting prices on their inventory, buy now prices, throw them up so that the user looking for that name, if I say, yep, the exact name you're looking for is available for $500, they will click on buy. They'll click buy now. If I say, yeah, it's available, let's talk about it, let's do a little negotiation, they're far more likely to leave that path, and I prefer not to. So when we talk about bulk, you need to have a scientific method, objective measurements. And what are those? Okay, I've got, brought to you by the letter P. And it worked out this way. I didn't try to make it this way, but it just kind of worked out this way when I was doing my algorithm a few years back. So presence of a domain name. This would be how well this domain name is already preferred on the internet. And this would be things like backlinks. This would be things, PageRank, anything of that nature that are objective measurements you can get from the various tools that let you know that this used to be a thriving site that very well could still have a heartbeat. And the heartbeat is a very important part of this particular measurement because you know that people are looking at least at what that website used to be on that domain name. So you could very well have interested buyers already coming to your door for those. Precision. For me, precision is just how easy it is to remember, how closely it matches the keywords that you're looking for. If you've got, and this would be somewhere where, say, the dashes and things of that nature come in, they would actually devalue a name by a bit based off of not having exactly what somebody would type in. So precision is how close is your domain to what somebody would type in exactly on the GoDaddy avail check. Pattern, this is more for the more speculative names, things like the four-letter names. We have this thought of four letters can't all be the same. If some of them are pronounceable, say, so consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, things of that nature, those carry a further valuation. It's easier for me on a four-letter, five-letter to look at the consonant vowel patterns of these domain names to see if they are pronounceable via an algorithm. I can't tell via an algorithm necessarily that XXCQ is pronounceable. So I can't, that's something that somebody likely won't type in. PPC, of course, we have metrics, Google Keyword Search, et cetera, that lets us know what advertisers are paying for the specific keywords in your domain. And fairly simple. Advertisers are willing to pay more for advertising on other sites then your domain could be worth more. Popularity. Popularity goes into the keywords. So this would be a keyword split, your name, Paul's cars, et cetera. What you would see is based off of search engine ranking, things of that nature, how popular those keywords are. And we have a couple of tools we use at GoDaddy, and there's a wonderful linguistic model called n-gram technology, n being a variable, where we can see, based off of the works collected, free internet resources like Project Gutenberg and such, how many times 2 words are used in conjunction with each other in written language. And we can go out to 3 words, 4 words, so it's called N, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I know, if I've got carspaul.com and paulscars.com, I can tell from using these tools that Paul and Car, or maybe that's not the best example, but Cedar Rapids Cars, say, those 2 terms more closely match in that order. So that order is more preferable. If you're just splitting the keywords and saying how popular is each keyword all by itself, you're not going to get a better valuation. You need to have not only what the keywords are, but what order they're in, and whether or not the order makes sense. And to do that via an algorithm and do it in bulk is actually quite difficult. But it's something we've worked hard on and have good plan with. And past sales. Past sales, of course, thing that GoDaddy has, we have a lot of sales. And we're able to take those sales, use our own algorithms to check the keywords, to check the patterns of the keywords, everything we just talked about, and see how they do. So we're able to actually adjust up and down on what keywords are trending right now and do that based off of real actual sales numbers. All right, so now what, right? We've got all these objective measurements. Somehow we have this algorithm that takes all those into play. We come and we do the scraping and the tools, everything we need to come up with numbers. Numbers. Like you price it, right? What you're going to be looking for is, again, we're talking volume. We're talking low-ish, not low, we'll call it low-ish margin. So I want to make sure I have a sustainable model where I can go buy names for a reg fee or for on the job fairly cheap and turn it for, call it 5 to 50 of what I paid for it, depending on how aggressive you actually are. In order to do that, and in order to use the platforms that we have, the GoDaddy platform, the CWMS platform, all these platforms, you've got to buy it now. If you're on the volume game. Now, if you're on the boutique side, hold and sell, great. That's not what I'm talking to, right? So this is certainly the high volume, real business aspect of it. All right, so you price it, right? Then what? Yes, I like this one. How are you going to get in front of people? This is the biggest thing that I've been working on personally for the past year and a half, is how do we get aftermarket names in front of the buyers? Now, it seems like a natural fit. You go to where the registrations are. The folks at Ethnic, the folks at CEDO, they understand this. They put it in front of registrars. They have great networks. I happen to have a responsibility at GoDaddy. I'm fairly certain I have more end-user buyers than anybody else in the world. So it was last June, I started putting auctions inventory into the purchase path. So if somebody's looking on GoDaddy.com and looking for paulscars.com, if I know about it, if I, in the aftermarket, know that's available, I'm going to put it in front of them. What that does for us, it gets it in front of the buyers, it increases the awareness of the aftermarket to everybody else in the world that's coming through here and looking for it. And you get people to understand the aftermarket, then they're going to be more willing to pay the money. So aftermarket car sales, and it's a perfect analogy to aftermarket car parts. You go to a junkyard if you're missing a rear view mirror. You understand that it's part of the culture now. We need to make that as far as the aftermarket in domains, and GoDaddy's working out with these partners in order to do that. And that's really it. For me, it's all about getting the domains in front of users, getting them in the buy now pricing, and having a realistic expectation on what the sales price is, because we want to make this a sustainable model and not necessarily a buy and hold and wait for the right offer. So thank you.
Yep.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning, Lizzie.
Morning, Lizzie.
Good morning, John Boy. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit numbers. I work for a German company, so traditionally we have a bit more numbers. And I agree with everything you say, because of course the buy now principle is something we're pushing as well, because we know it really works for all the bulk domain names. At CEDO, we are fortunate to be doing both. We do bulk and we do boutique. So I'm going to start with a few of my slides. I'm trying to give you some background, so if you don't know where to look, the CEDO market study is probably really a good place to start. We just released our market study on 2011 numbers yesterday, so it's still very fresh. At least I hope you haven't been watching the news too much, so it's not old news. But you can see that we do studies where you can relate back to what kind of TLDs are actually being sold. We sell about 40,000 domain names each year, and it gives a pretty good picture on which TLDs are sold, the total volume of domain names being sold, and of course also the sales volume of these domain names. What are good indicators on the sales price? I think it's always good if you're selling a .com that you actually know what most .coms sell for. So for example, in our market study, we have the sales price per GTLD, for example, or for CCTLDs, the most popular ones. And we also have median prices. What is a median price is where we take out the top sales and the lower sales. For example, in the .com, we sold gambling.com for 2.5 million last year. That wouldn't be included in the median prices because it's a one-off and a very special price. So this is something you can look at when you're selling a .net, a .com, or any other extension, or the CCTLDs, to have a look at where do you think, what are other people getting for these, for my domain names. When we talk about what makes domains, what kind of data go into your sales price, what are good indicators of tradability. I took two elements out of our market study, which I find very interesting. On the one hand, it is, of course, a category. So if you have domain names that fall into one of these categories, we have over 200 categories in our search, and we allocate them all in our market study. And you can see that the most popular one is the business topic. So if you have a domain name that falls into this category, it is most likely to be more sexy than any other topic. And then also the number of characters goes into your potential sales price. So if you have, so in this case, for example, last year it was the 8 characters that was the most popular. And it goes up, the domain name with the most characters we sold last year had 42 characters. Now yesterday I was having a breakfast, expert breakfast, and people show me their lists and they ask me, what do you think it's worth? And I look at them, and I often see names that are, this size, and this really shows that, the shorter the name, the better or highly likely it's going to sell. So gambling.com again is a good example where the 8 characters fit exactly to this statistic. Now, Paul has already been saying, why is buy now so popular? Because we shouldn't forget that there are so many people out there that have no clue what a domain name is worth or what they should pay. We need to help these guys. We need to help all these end users that have never heard of a sex.com being sold for 30 million. They don't know. But most domains are not being sold for such high prices. They're being sold for $1,500. So we need to help them make that decision. And we've been together pushing to help make that easier. And the buy now is already taking up 30% of our overall sales. So that is a really, really good figure, and it is really helping the whole market to develop. We still have 40% of the sales on make offer, and we still recommend that very much for the high value, for the boutique names, to make offer, to find a price, negotiate, make offer. And for that, of course, you need a lot of buyers to ensure your price actually goes up. Now I'm going a little bit economic. Last year, we had this economic guru guy coming up to us and asking, he's been doing a lot of research. He did his PhD on housing and all these kind of prices. And he said, I'm really interested because there's this natural fit with domain names. And he said, can I use your data? And we said, yeah. So we started working with this guy. His company is called idnx.com. And he compared a lot of our sales data. He had access to all of them and compared that to the stock price. And it's really interesting to see that, this is the chart that you now see, how domain names are so aligned to the NASDAQ. And you can see when, our Q4 figures were not as good as Q2, and you can see the perfect alignment to the stock market. This is also something, if there's money in the NASDAQ, there's going to be money in domains because people are investing. So the IDNX and this guy, this economic guru, as we call him internally, he's called Thies Lindenthal. He started working for us. He's now in our Boston office because he wanted to be close to MIT and Harvard. And he's now working on a pricing tool for CEDO. We already have a pretty good pricing tool, but we wanted to improve that with a lot of data and economic factors. So you would like to watch out for that one coming up in the next months, up to half a year, where we're expecting to see great strides in trying to find the real good price. Because having a really good price is important. We all know the same stories. Everyone, especially domainers, sometimes come with a list and hope there's this, $1 million deal inside of their portfolio. And we need to really set realistic price expectations. On the one hand, because no one's buying for that amount, and on the other hand, we need to make sure we find the right price with a lot of economic factors going into that price. So you'll be seeing a good development in that area. Now, I'm often asked, I have the .org. The sex.com sold for 30 million. Does that mean my sec.co is worth 13 million as well, or maybe just 11? Not per se. And you can see, we've researched, again, this is Thies doing a study. He researched, for example, sex.com. If we sold sex.co as well, he would match that. He was doing kind of pairing, and he would match the prices over time and see what is the discount on the other TLDs. And this shows that there's actually quite a discount on a lot of these domain names. Now, we are fortunate to sometimes see domains flip. I think we had about 100,000 names being flipped a couple of times, so that's why the data are a pretty good indicator on what the info could do, or the .co in relation to the .com. So this goes back to your point where we say historical data, past sales data. We use that as well for indicators like this. So this is also a question when we get to the new TLDs. What is going to happen in terms of pricing? How are they going to work? Well, most likely they're going to start in a lower range to, of course, the .com. So this was it from my end. I think we're going to have time for questions later on.
Absolutely. I think next up we'll have Ken kind of discuss a little bit more specific scenarios that he has seen in the intellectual property space, and then we'll open it up for questions. So
thank you.
Absolutely.
Howdy. I have analog prompts here. William Blake said, "The fool who persists in his folly will become wise." So I guess in that sense, I would consider myself an expert in this field. I founded Marksman in January of 1998. Our business principally, as Lisa mentioned, is helping corporations launch and protect their brands. And that involves investigations, online monitoring, and the buying and selling of intellectual property. So besides domain names, we also buy and sell patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade names, licensing agreements, coexistence agreements, et cetera. We've been involved in some of the largest domain name transactions in history. Most of those have been private, so unannounced. A couple years ago, we decided to be a little more public about what our efforts were with NameQuiver. And last year, we partnered with Moniker or we partnered with Moniker, and last year together we sold social.com for $2.6 million, which was the largest reported domain sale of last year. So that's why I'm here. And I want to talk about some of the challenges in working both in the domainer and the corporate world, which I know that's not unique in this room, so you'll understand some of those. And I'd like to talk about some of the forces that are brought to bear in determining value that are outside some of the traditional and predictive matrices of valuation, and those I would call the beauty and the tragedy of the human condition. And those would be things like emotion, happenstance, luck, urgency, and need. We've negotiated in some very tricky, interesting, pressurized situations. I want to share with you a couple of examples where the notion of traffic or some of the matrix that they've talked about just don't come into play. We purchased names out of bankruptcy court. I don't know if you've negotiated with a bankruptcy judge, but it's like talking to a glacier. They also don't really know sometimes what a domain name is, much less why it would have value. We've gotten names back for corporations who have inadvertently not re-registered their name, and that's particularly exciting when they're a big e-commerce company. We have gotten names for people who have already printed it on 10,000 units of packaging and didn't own the name. We've gotten names back for people who featured it in a Super Bowl commercial, and somebody at the last minute realized the company didn't ever purchase the name. So you can see where people would literally spit the dummy in those situations. There's also some interesting things where you're negotiating for a client, there's a lot of pressure and you're not getting calls back from people, and sometimes the solution is to move on. Sometimes the solution is maybe to offer more money, but we try to find out what's behind the story, and sometimes that means going to somebody's house and knocking on their door. In a couple of instances, one was in Denmark. We weren't getting calls back. We sent somebody to knock on his door and found out he would not negotiate with anybody who was not Danish. So it's the, buy American, except we're the foreigner. And once we had a Danish intermediary, that transaction went very smoothly. Same with an instance where we weren't getting a call back in India, sent somebody on a train to a remote village and found out that the town only had electricity for 4 hours in a day. So we literally had a negotiating window that we had to hit to actually make that go forward. And some things that you just cannot anticipate. We were trying to get a name for a client. It was very pressurized from their concern, big ticking clock. And the person we're talking with is advocating for a mentally disabled person who is on death row. So he didn't want to give up that name, and the client is not as sensitive maybe as they should have been. But what we tried to negotiate was donating to his cause or linking to another site to try to make it good for both sides. And he just didn't want to do it. We ended up walking away from that, and then I think a month or so later, the client said, ping him one more time and see if we can get a deal. If not, we will move on. And unfortunately, the man had been executed, and the guy didn't care about the name, and we got the name. So in that instance, you have to go, was that a success story? Who knows? So anyway, there's challenges in that. And I want to talk about the challenges of working with corporations, both on the buy and sell side. A corporation, as many of you know, is a big ship to turn. They're risk aversive. They don't want embarrassment internally or externally. They're slow to trust. They're not going to put all their eggs in for one vendor in their basket. We've spent 14 years developing relationships with corporations. It's a slow wooing process. And I would say that the most tenuous part of the relationship is reputation. And oftentimes, it's only as good as your last deal or the weakest person on your team. And despite what Mitt Romney and the 14th Amendment says, corporations are not people. They are an amalgam of acquisitions, as you know, where small companies under one brand name or different departments that have varying budgets and various buckets to put the money in. So they'll be motivated differently, perhaps, than you might think they are, even though they're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. We get directives when we are working for domainers, negotiating for them, and approaching clients that we know to educate your client on the value of a domain. And in some instances, that's true. Corporations are not intuitive about the value of maybe a generic domain or the internet at all. But in other instances, they are super sophisticated, and it may be they have other strategies, and that may not be apparent. One of the issues, and that'll show up also in the new GTLDs, is corporations, if they're big enough, will have competing interests. So what you're offering them may be great for one part of the company, but it doesn't make sense for another part of the company, and that what they're doing on that side may be bigger than what you're offering. It also may be an issue of internal public relations or external public relations. For example, the last few years have been challenging economically. Corporations have to lay off people. Say they lay off 10,000 people. They don't want to be in the news for buying a $3 million domain name, perhaps, at the same time. Some of that stuff can be solved privately, but if it leaks because corporations are big enough and there's many leak points, then that could be an embarrassment for them. So that's something that may not be something you think about. On the flip side, maybe they're not using a domain name. Maybe you're prepared and have the money to offer a generous figure up to, 7 figures for a name. Because a corporation is big, it really doesn't move their bottom line one way or the other. So they may do some analysis on if they need to do it, but they're probably not going to be in the same timeline as you are. Sometimes it's an issue of internally where the money goes. They may be squabbling so much internally if it goes to IT or legal or marketing that they don't end up buying it. And there's also some issues that maybe they don't want to let it go into the hands of a competitor, and sometimes that gets to the point of paranoia. I was actually negotiating with somebody in October one year about a name, and he was convinced I was going to sell it to his biggest competitor, and they were going to launch a Super Bowl ad, and he was going to be embarrassed and lose his job. And I assured him that wasn't the case, and it really didn't matter. So I went to my client and said, "Are you stampeded for this name?" And they said, "No, we just want to get it." And so I said, "How about I call you back in March?" And we pick up discussions then. Waited till March, called him, we got the deal. So it's crazy. On the domainer side, no matter our advocacy about how clever you are technically and your entrepreneurial spirit and that you're good, solid citizens and businessmen, the view in some quarters of the corporate world is that a domainer is the same thing as a squatter. And I think as long as brands are used to divert traffic or for black hat SEO, or you're trying to sell companies misspellings or get their keywords, they're always going to have that sort of opinion. And I'm not saying any of you do that. I'm just saying it happens. It also happens on the launch of new GTLDs. Corporations a lot of times feel like they have to register things defensively. .xxx is a good example. There's already 80,000, I think, registrations that are just keeping the name off the market. And with the new GTLDs, there's always issues at the second level. If you're co-brokering or brokering a name for a partner, be very careful of how you do that. Don't overstate your relationship or what you're saying. For example, in the state of California, a verbal agreement is a binding agreement, and some corporations will come after you if you back down because you had a miscommunication with your own client. So be careful about that kind of stuff. You need to be prepared to offer good faith money if you're selling something to a corporation. It's a big figure, and obviously putting things in escrow to make sure that's secure. And it kind of gets back to value of what we're talking about. Just be flexible on what your idea of value is. Do your homework. Try to keep your emotions out of that. A good way to kind of determine the market is an auction. If you have a reserve that's very high and no one meets it, that kind of tells you that maybe it's not as valuable as you think it is. But I applaud your technological skills and your entrepreneurial spirit, and keep dreaming, and thanks for your attention.
Well, I think that we've learned a great deal from each one of their presentations. Just want to ask you each a couple of questions and then open it up to the group, now that we have about, I think, 20 minutes left. It's funny, I'm asked a lot about domain valuations. I get asked this a lot working at Moniker and Snap Names, and in all different parts of the life cycle, whether you're purchasing names from the drop or the expiring market, or if you're purchasing them from a premium aftermarket sale. Is there a standard formula, Lizzie, that you guys use when you're establishing a buy it now price? Is there a 1 + 1 = 2 that you recommend people use, or is it something that you usually sit down with your client, kind of take them through all the metrics? Kind of explain that process.
I mean, there are a couple of ways to do it, but in general, it's not just 1 and 1 = 2, because that would be fantastic. We're trying to get to that level with our new pricing tool, but again, it will always need a sanity check. It's never going to be without a sanity check. So what we do is, if we look at a portfolio, for example, we look at a couple of metrics. For example, of course, what kind of TLD, how long is the domain name, what is the traffic like. There are a number of things that we would look at. Has it been flipped 20 times? Is there content on that site? Is it just a domain name? I mean, we sell domain names that are also real websites. So we look at a couple of these elements and then try to, of course, we look at the past sales, same as we look at comparable sales. So if cars.com, and then we look at other car domain names, so comparable sales. So there are a lot of metrics that go into that evaluation of a domain name value. And then we come up with a price.
So you've mentioned a lot of different of the key kind of metrics and factors you use, and you mentioned a few things on the SEO side. So I see this huge trend of SEO speculation where page rank, age. Can you take us through a little bit, Paul, what you're seeing there and why that's important? Because selling a page with content on it, for example, might have a different effect on the value of a domain that's blank or it's a parked page.
Sure. And I think this goes back to what the buyer intends for the domain. So as a seller, if I have a domain and I know, and I briefly touched on this, but if I know it has a heartbeat, if I know that this domain gets traffic, and this traffic is of a non-extinguishable variety, then I'll know that there should be some value and some intrinsic value added to that domain name for the buyer. So if I'm working on backlinks that are maybe older blog posts, things like that, I wouldn't weigh those necessarily as heavy as backlinks from like a Wikipedia or a resource type site. If I'm getting traffic, I've got the name parked, and I'm getting traffic from type-ins, with no referrer in the URL, well, obviously I'm going to know a little bit more about that name, that it has value to the internet in general because of what the words are, because people are typing it in. And PageRank is part of that, backlinks are part of that, obviously the type-in traffic. All those are just, again, the objective measures that help you determine whether there's any life in that domain. And if there's life in that name, then there's value to people other than just the domain owner, which means you can ask a little bit more.
Well, it's interesting because I think outside of the standard domain space or the sophisticated SEO professional, these types of metrics might not make a whole lot of sense. And I think that Ken, you might have spoken to this a little bit. When you're working with some of the really large companies and the large brands, I'm assuming that they might not even know nor less care about page rank of a domain and things like this. What are some of the things that when they come to you first and say, we need to acquire this domain name, what are some of the things that they think about in terms of trying to assess a value to a domain asset?
If they're buying, they've already done all that. Marketing has done that. They know what they want. They have a budget for it, and they, for various reasons, either to try to get fair market value or to not tip their hat on a strategic initiative, they have us negotiate. So they're pretty set on that. If it's selling something, that's where it gets to be a little more, where we can have more input and use some of the things these folks are talking about, curb appeal, .com, traffic, those things. And it's useful to them to upsell to someone to get that budget.
Now, do you see any of your clients ever buying any domains that aren't .coms? Do they go after the .nets? Do they go after the .orgs? Things of that nature?
It depends. Typically they want .com. If we're negotiating for them, when we talk to the seller, we'll see if they own any other names that are associated with that and just try to buy all of those at once so we're not going back. If it's a big product launch, we have negotiated for 40 CCTLDs at the same time. So they obviously want coverage everywhere because, as Lisa said, Germany, Netherlands, Hong Kong, China, the UK, it's really country specific. They really go there first maybe instead of .com.
Well, that's kind of a good segue into kind of some of the emerging trends we see. You know, a lot of people are talking about CCTLDs, the new GTLDs that are coming out to the market. What do you think that those are going to do to the, you've touched on this a little bit, of the valuations and how that's going to play into the metrics of when assigning prices to domains?
I'd just like to quickly react to what you're saying, because we, of course, I mean, you know, we have a base in Europe as well as in the States. So many European countries, of course, start off with the European TLDs, logically. And then the .com will then also be a part of it, but the other ones are much more important. So in the German space, it would be the DE, the CH for Switzerland, and the AT for Austria, for example, as a bundle. And we have a lot of clients that really purchase them after each other, which works because they all get the same name in their own language, so no one really notices, which you know, if you start a company with a global brand, you would want to get it all at the same time. In terms of the new TLDs, we are definitely excited about it, but we're also very realistic. I think if you look at .co and if you look at .me, you can see a couple of things that are very important. A, they have an extremely good team. B, they have extremely good marketing.
Right.
C, they are really well funded. And then they have really good TLDs. So it's a real good name. And then all of that going into the package, I think we're going to see, we're not going to see too many that are going to be extremely successful. I would like everyone to be. So if everyone has that package ready, you know, they will probably all have a really good shot. But I think it's not easy to find that ideal combination.
What do you think the new GTLDs are going to do to the market, or do you see any other new trends that are going to be affecting the premium market space?
Well, I think that the GTLDs is going to be the biggest shakeup. I mean, there will be other trends. I'm seeing you know, some of the alternates, I think it comes through in the CEDO market analysis and ours as well, is that .org is doing very well. Average sales price on .orgs are generally, for me, higher than .nets. I think that as the new GTLDs come around, what you're going to see is you're going to see, at first, a little confusion in the market for the end users. So the end users, if they see all these others, they may flock to those first. I can see a situation where if somebody is looking for, say, I'll go back to my pulse cards. If somebody's looking for that, they see it's not available in the com, see it's not available on the net, they'll go ahead and try in some of these other GTLDs, especially if it's regional, if we get like the .nyc or, you know, some of those that we're talking about coming out, they may try those. So there'll be this period where I believe that end users will be trying out to see if those work, and whether or not they do, I think that is the shakeup. You know, we can branch one way and the GTLDs really are successful, or we can branch the other way that actually just strengthens com.org.net. And I don't know how I feel yet, and I'm not sure. You know, we've all got our opinions, I'm sure, but I think that we're very new on this, and we'll see. It'll branch one of those two ways.
Well, let's open it up to questions from the audience since we have a few minutes left. Is there anyone that has specific questions for the panel while we have them here?
I have a question for Paul. My name's Joe Alanya with CentralNIC.
Hi, Joe.
Paul, where can someone get more information on that N-gram technology? I thought that was really interesting.
You know, there's quite a bit actually online, and MIT has done some linguistic research and actually has some N-gram technology available. What you would need to run it, there are some open source web services and such on that, but essentially if you've got the wherewithal, we've done it internally, and we got resources from actually Google has something called Project Gutenberg, which has open source literature from thousands and thousands of books in any language. So I can tell you without speaking German, I can use my N-gram technology to know that these two German words actually are used together in written language structurally. So I can actually use that to be multilingual within the platform without knowing it myself.
So just search for N-gram?
Absolutely, N-gram, yep.
Any other questions for the panel today?
Hello, Kieran McCarthy here from .next. I have a question with regard to new GTLDs. Do you think that the fact that all these new extensions will appear will create a new market, i.e. people that haven't bought domains will buy domains because they see that there's new opportunities there, or do you think it will be broadly the same number of people just getting new domains?
It is kind of an interesting question because when the press started talking about the new generic TLDs and everyone finally figured out what I did for a living, my friends and family, do you think that this will create awareness among the masses or help to?
I think you both have touched on there's going to be confusion, and that may be for a long time. If you talk to anybody outside the industry, they don't know what you're talking about. You can explain it's on the right side of that, but they don't know what you're talking about. And you've heard, like I saw the gentleman on the first day of .co, he has a billboard in Times Square. He has a Super Bowl commercial. That's the sort of thing you need to do to bring the awareness to people. And I think, things like maybe geographic things like .nyc or some of the brand things where they have the resources and can direct people, they may be quicker. I also think it's going to be crazy. There's going to be a lot of issues on the second level. So it's going to be wild for a while, and it may be 5 or 6 years, who knows.
Well, I think what's nice is that .co might have laid some groundwork for us because they've worked, partnering with GoDaddy, doing the Super Bowl ad. They have at least shown what a TLD means. What is the foundation for that? And maybe that's helped us a little bit. Are there any other questions for the panel before we wrap up? Go ahead.
For Paul, it's regarding misspelling domains.
Yes.
Or misspelled domains. Does it make sense to build those domains out, or does it just type in traffic is really the value of those type of domains?
There's always value. It's going to be a little bit harder. So if you think of Twitter, I think started without the E, following the model of the flickers and things of that nature that started on a clever usage of a term. And I think they realized that it's harder to build that brand. It can certainly be done, absolutely can be done. It's just the barrier to entry on that becomes a little bit harder if you have to explain how to type the name in. If I can't tell you in a 30-second ad spot what my domain is in natural language and have you go right and type it in, then it's far harder for me to get that message across. If I'm telling you, it's Flickr without the E, it's far more difficult propositions. Possible, but more difficult.
So that's more on a branding level. How about like, I'm going to use a weird example, but like peanut butter, and you remove the T in the butter, for example. Okay. And you write content about peanut butter, and the URL, the domain is with 1 T. Does it make sense to build that out, or you just accept the type-in traffic as realistically all you're going to get from that domain?
Well, no, at that point, so you can't set aside branding. I don't think that is a realistic or fair thing to do, is set aside the branding. The brand is who you are, it's what you are. If you want to build your brand through search, and search only, absolutely you can do it with all sorts of random characters in your name. But you're beholden then to the search engines. And you need to work extremely hard on your SEO. You need to make sure that everything is square so that the search engines know how to find you, because nobody's going to find you any other way. If you've got a brand that's typable, that's memorable, then you may get type-ins, likely more likely. And you can also do radio spots, you can do TV spots. As you build your brand, your advertising avenues open with something that's easy to remember and type.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, Phil Corwin from Internet Commerce Association. A question for Mr. Taylor, since you brought up, mentioned IP. I'm wondering, as you work with your corporate clients, how do they feel about the utility of the existing trademark right protections, the UDRP and the Anti-Cyber Squatting Act here in the U.S., and the new rights protections being put in place for new TLDs? And the flip side of that, are you getting any feedback from them in terms of whether they're looking toward possible applications for .brands for internal and customer relation purposes?
You know, I'm not a spokesman for corporations, but I think generally, from my understanding, they're very happy with like the UDRP is a good, quick dispute resolution mechanism. I think in the new GTLDs, you have the clearinghouse, you have ways to challenge it later. But you know, if you can make it easy for people and they're experts at doing what they're doing and don't have to do some of the things you're talking about, then you know, go for it.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, are there any more questions for the panel? Well, thank you all for coming today. Thank you so much for our panel. If you have any questions, let us know.